Hi, everyone. I can't really drag the classic intro out of me because I don't want to have a how it started versus how it's going kind of thing by the end of the video. When I was making my video on the painter, I did not look forward to dragging myself through that series, but I made the most of it. I am content with the analysis I made of it by watching the whole thing. I was a little less than content with the advice I tried to give for how it could be better, but I can live with that. That feeling I had before watching The Painter was so much stronger with Angel Engine that I couldn't put it into words. There is probably a more banal word for dread, which might be apt, but I won't bother looking it up. I know there's a lot of art that I'm just going to bounce off of because I can't understand it, or it doesn't aim to satisfy my tastes in any way. I don't think the idea is as strong as some might think, but the whole "it's not meant for you" defense has its place, and I understand where it comes from. Perhaps the bite-sized vertical format for Instagram is a little odd, but the idea of an angel being captured by humanity to be harvested for its power sounds like it should be up my alley. I have seen enough shit about demons and independent horror on YouTube, and I have written so much about them myself, I might just be sick of this type of monster. What happens when we strike down the things that are meant to strike down the demons? Well, fuck if I know because my patience ran thin after 12 videos. There are 20 I didn't watch. A human race on the decline captures an angel that came down to them and locks it up in the second Tower of Babel, so miracles could be tortured out of it using the newly invented Angel Engine. The guy who made it got shot, but he came back to life thanks to the Angel Engine. There are a few suggestions of unnatural influences guiding some things, but I don't know where that would lead because I stopped. I spent over 12 minutes for all of that, including a music video kind of thing for the poem Boots by Rudyard Kipling as read by Taylor Holmes. You might have heard of it in the trailers for 28 Years Later. It added nothing to the series or my experience other than confusing me. Speaking of the music, there seems to be only 2 tracks for the series, one of which is just the Lavender Town theme but slowed down. I don't really hate this series, I'm just disappointed by it. If the visuals weren't AI generated, I might not be so apathetic about them. If the voices weren't AI generated, I might not actively dislike them for how much they take me out of the experience. Christ. Was I ever in the experience? I didn't realize how out of it I was until we went from the slightly off-putting voice for the angel to the awful generic male voices you might have already heard on TikTok or whatever. Now, some people prefer that their trash is made by humans. However, I think throwing prompts at a generative AI program until you get something satisfying is kind of almost like a creative process. You can read into the final product the creator chose to share as much as you can read into a song, painting, or novel. A common conclusion is that the person behind the generated materials is a pervert, but to focus on Angel Engine, I can sense an interest in twisting the biblical, sort of in the same vein as the Mandela Catalog. Given that we have a giant symbol of human hubris named the Second Tower of Babel, it's not a very creative take. The reliance on AI-generated materials for Angel Engine doesn't do it any favors, but it's not what actually makes the series such a dull watch. It is uncreative and squanders its decent premise with weak storytelling. I think the AI stuff voids the series of any charm it might have had, and it still wouldn't save it from being just boring without the pleasure of even being a dumpster fire. I don't want to bash the creator unearthly, because I don't see the point in doing that, but the series is like pathetic, just sort of graceless and without much bite. The face of the angel faded from my mind while watching this. However, I will certainly remember the feeling of guilt because I wasted my time watching the series. My only praise, the premise, comes from the very first video. I have always hated my voice. I read a lot, just always interested in expanding my vocabulary and looking to learn more. The people in my life often enjoyed what I had to say because I tend to be bluntly honest and I have an often unorthodox perspective on things. But I wish that all meant something to me. I remember far more vividly every time someone couldn't understand what I was saying, how my parents would have to redefine my Spanish so my own relatives could understand me, or rethinking what I was going to say once I remembered how it would sound coming out of my mouth. I know 2 languages and I struggle to be understood when speaking either of them. Back when I was making a narration video for Mr. Mix, I had to confront my voice again, but I found that it doesn't take much of a conscious effort to sound soft and timid. It would give the impression that I was taking the story seriously and felt concerned about it, which would complement how deeply unserious that story was. I just had to place my voice in my head rather than my neck or chest and keep it there. I did the same trick for the other creepypasta readings, though it proved a little difficult to maintain with longer narrations. When I wanted to talk about something else, I felt a little more prepared to use my normal, somewhat embarrassing speaking voice. I still think a lot about my voice though. Some nights I hate it, and other nights I'm more at peace with it. It challenges me. I am convinced that it will always hold back this channel. I think about finding someone else to read my scripts, paying them to do so, making a machine read out my scripts. Anything that could help me push past this barrier that I am so convinced is in my way. The thought still passes through my mind every now and then, but I don't indulge it. I wish this didn't challenge me, but I don't want to sidestep it altogether. If I use my voice for my words, then it will be an assurance that what I am saying is true to me, even if it sounds a little odd or is going against the grain. If someone hears my voice and can listen past the, at best, unusual tone to engage with my actual words, then maybe the time I spent wrestling with myself was worth it. Sometimes I wonder if the choice to use AI has denied people this challenge that I face with every video that I make, but I understand why they use it. Quite frankly, an unusual voice might be a rather low hurdle compared to what stops some people from realizing their own creative work. Money, time, motivation, brutal industries, irrational self-loathing, and God knows what else life will throw at us. I kind of hate it whenever I can't find a World of Darkness book online and I have to actually buy it because now my little hobby videos inexplicably have some kind of budget to them. My sister is an illustrator and I can see a dozen struggles that I don't have restraining her creative work. Hell, she jokes plenty about passing her moe anime girls off to Grok. Though I don't think very highly of them at all. This is why I can't really bring myself to hate the guys who use AI for their creative work just because they're using AI. I just wish that they could confront their own flaws and try to work on them or even embrace them, even if it doesn't make any sense. They have been given an easy way out of the problem that doesn't address the many other problems that are stopping them in the first place. That is where I reserve my anger. A part of me also can't help but wonder if it's AI top to bottom, if the premise itself was the result of asking a generative AI for a premise, that there is no creativity behind this project beyond choosing what looks acceptable and tying the materials together for presentation. Is that hollow art? Something truly vapid that exists just so someone can say they made it, perhaps even profit off of it, and not because they wanted to share a part of themselves? Though I don't really hold that last sentiment for Angel Engine, it was in the back of my mind when I was watching the infamously discontinued Liminal Land. Best known for its creators, Nexpo and Nick Crowley, who make videos covering spooky stuff on the internet and their choice to heavily use AI-generated images, Liminal Land is kind of a mess. It has a premise as absurd as the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park and plays it completely straight with a suspiciously successful theme park in the middle of nowhere, which is fitted with a suburban labyrinth underneath the whole thing. People go missing, make weird faces, and become obsessed with the place. And honestly, that's it. There is an associated website that hypothetically exists to provide more details, but it's nothing of substance. Perhaps some of the stuff there is tied to videos that will never get published. Nothing on the website gave me a better understanding of the videos and vice versa. Before I jab at the AI stuff, let me just say that the premise is already difficult for me to buy into. This series came out in 2023 and exists in the shadow of the general craze around liminal spaces from 2020 to 2022. It's definitely also influenced by Gemini Home Entertainment, Mandela Catalog, that Blue Channel Salson video made by some pervert, and probably also The Painter. It is fundamentally very dated, and beyond the AI stuff, which I'll get into, it's not doing anything interesting with its influences to prevent it from feeling generic. It's a bad imitation of better projects. On paper, I sort of get the idea and horror behind Liminal Land. In my head, I have this narrative about a theme park that exists between our coherent reality and some chaotic dimension that operates on the logic of nightmares. The Charon Corporation that runs the theme park is named after the Greek ferryman of the underworld, which is so on the nose that I dislike it. However, I think that name hints towards my understanding of the series. I'm not sure if a theme park is the best setting for this, and I can't lie, this is almost the premise of Silent Hill if you sheared off the personalized torment that makes it so compelling to work with, but something else could fill that void. A cosmic horror that's never given much detail, and I think the series was onto something like that. The underground suburbs are incomprehensibly larger than the theme park, and we only get glimpses of a monster in the last two videos. I actually kind of respect how, compared to a lot of similar projects you can find on YouTube, Liminal Land was pretty reserved with its monster. Unfortunately, the first three videos are extremely boring. Here's some people, which face is the scariest? These people went missing, and then they look like this.
But just take a look at this!
Even The Painter had the courtesy of putting some bonkers murders and slightly unsettling illustrations that could grab my attention. But Liminal Land only has some AI-generated images supported by decent editing. The last two videos are a lot more interesting in style. Welcome Home has 3D animation by Geonosis, who made some backrooms videos, and Mommy's Friend was definitely influenced by point-and-click adventure games, which makes it so much more distinct than a lot of other independent horror stuff you can find on YouTube. This does not help the greater problem that the two dudes behind Liminal Land might have a good taste in horror, but that doesn't make them good at delivering horror. The attempts at horror in Liminal Land are just bog standard or corny, which is not helped by the premise. We can't even enjoy the build-up to a jump scare. Throughout the series, it's frequently brought up that people are inexplicably drawn to the park and stay there for far longer than what should be reasonable for a vacation. Liminal spaces were once understood as strangely familiar places, and I've had that feeling before when looking at those kinds of images. I wondered if this association with nostalgia would be explored as the reason for why people stay at Liminal Land, and if there was anything in the series about how this yearning for the past could be a death trap, in the real world or in its fiction, but no. The place is just unreasonably creepy, and people stay there for no reason beyond a supernatural influence and encouragement by the evil corporation. I think the Charon Corporation is trying to keep people in their suburban labyrinths to drain residents of money, and that's kind of boring, to be honest. In some ways, this feels like a parody of internet horror, just an alignment of tropes instead of an actual story. I've seen people say that the original version of the website directed users to buying associated merchandise, but it seems that shop isn't around anymore. Maybe it was just a cash grab because that would explain how shallow this whole thing is. Some people are upset that the Liminal Land made use of AI-generated images instead of commissioning artists or making their own images, especially as the creators of the series definitely had the resources to do so. Hell, the video that made me think about Liminal Land was a big ranking video by Spaceman Scott, where he crashes out so hard when talking about it that he seemingly ignored or forgot Geonosis' contribution to the series. It might be a little difficult to emulate the chaos of those old AI-generated images, which the series did lean into, but it's not at all impossible. Even then, we would have the same problems as with Angel Engine. Bad horror, bad storytelling, and an idea squandered by a lack of depth for me to sink my teeth into. Honestly, it's no wonder that Nexpo and Crowley used AI art for this. If illustrators were thrown at this thing, then maybe some people could have benefited from it. When I was finished with writing a homebrew sourcebook for 5th edition Hunter the Reckoning and started to format it, I left several spaces open for illustrations. However, certain changes in the political climate over the last year have made it pretty hard to find work. I'll survive, but every illustration I had in mind for that book had a price tag to it. It was so damn tempting to just look past the stupid, reckless arrogance that drives the big AI corporations to make the book as I had envisioned it. Fill it from front to back with images that might be what I had envisioned, but were generated by a machine, which itself was created with a transgression against an unfathomable amount of artists by scraping their work against their consent. I thought, who gives a shit if a bloody mortician's hammer was or wasn't made by a person? Well, I did. And I don't know if it's pride or principles that stopped me from doing that. I hate myself enough to think that I'm just blindly clinging to virtues out of impulse, or maybe just to please some crowd. But I know what a book like that can represent to an artist. That they are disposable and not needed. That the truest form of expression has no place in a world that seems eager to tear through the human spirit like a meat grinder. I'd like to believe I sort of understand the feeling, because what has been turning me away from doing more videos on 40k is the amount of AI content that exists for it. I saw some hour-long AI-produced video talking about 40k that in 3 days had 4 times the amount of views compared to the first part of the World of Darkness iceberg after a month. I know it's stupid, and that 40k is just considerably more popular than the World of Darkness, but seeing that kind of fucked me up. I was laying in bed waiting for an eagle to tear out my liver or something, a symbol for my vain attempts to talk about what I like to an audience of no one, compared to the amount of people that would rather listen to a machine. Maybe it was that bit of empathy that pushed me to rethink how I was going to do the homebrew book. But it was never really about the hypothetical pictures. I had ideas and I wanted to convey them, and maybe that's what mattered most. I reformatted the entire book to remove the spaces for images, with only a few exceptions for the chapter pages and some logos that I designed. Like every video I make, it's a little disappointing, far from ideal, but I think I can live with that. Also, if I did use AI for this book, my sister would probably rip my head off, so it definitely wouldn't have been worth it. I can think of a few more examples of AI-generated images in these kinds of projects. I don't really like Dreams of an Insomniac, but it made use of AI-generated images of children to work around the fact that using pictures of real children for something like that raises some strange ethical questions. It did also have AI-generated images of adults, and its creator has gone on to regret using AI for that project, even when it was somewhat of a novelty and a lot of the visuals were still either live action or illustrated. The series is cancelled, but for reasons largely unrelated to its usage of AI, but I wanted to mention it because this is the only example I have for someone regretting their use of AI. My issues with Streams of Insomniac largely boiled down to it not being my kind of thing, rather than creative shallowness like with Angel Engine or Liminal Land. Greylock also made use of AI generated images, but using AI is the least of its creators' problems, and I don't think it ties into the few noticeable flaws that series does have. I couldn't genuinely say that the series is shallow in the same way that Angel Engine and Liminal Land are, but otherwise the series is as decent as it is dead. Not at all horror related, but I also wanted to mention Ready or Not, which is an indie first-person shooter game I bought while it was on a sale and has a mission where you go after some fat chud. In his apartment, there are all these posters and some video thumbnails on a TV, which are all clearly AI generated, which just looks really awful compared to everything else that is rendered in 3D. Unsurprisingly, when you skip out on getting actual artists or making your own shit, you're going to get stuff that looks like it cost $0 and was made with zero effort, especially with the kind of AI image generators that existed in 2023 and 2024. And on the same branch of non-horror independent video games, okay, look, don't fucking start the debate. Claire Obscure Expedition 33, which I only played a little bit of before Game Pass redid a subscription thing and I no longer have access to it, did have placeholder assets that were generated by AI. These were swapped out with proper assets later in development, but one was found after launch which was pointed out. There was a whole controversy because, for reasons outside the scope of this video, some people are essentially offended by the existence of the game, and were very happy to call the game AI slop, when this placeholder thing was the only known use of AI during the development of this game. It was later swapped out like all of the other placeholders, and the developers stated that they experimented with AI throughout development, but didn't really vibe with what it offered, and to this day, some people are still mad about it because I guess you can't please everyone, especially if they really want to be angry. This bit of controversy is why I was worried that my choice to not use AI came from pointless moralism, but I am happy to have ultimately made my own decision out of empathy. For a final note on Angel Engine, in January of this year, Black Lantern Collective revealed a video game based on the series, in which the player performs surgery on people coming into the Second Tower of Babel with the power of the Angel Engine. It looks alright, and the developers actually made no use of generative AI in their own creative process. I'm surprised this game exists at all, and is playable at the time of this video's publishing, but given how much I've expressed interest in the premise of Angel Engine, this is probably the best thing to come out of it. I also kind of want to talk about the AI crap we see on DriveThruRPG, and a few rather odd-looking illustrations that have shown up in recent World of Darkness books, but I think I'm getting sick of this topic. I wanted to focus on Angel Engine and Liminal Land because with those two, I see the use of AI as indicative of a laziness that is pervasive throughout the entire projects. But I bring these other examples to show some other extent to which AI was used. Sometimes it just looks tacky, is meant to be replaced, or doesn't really impact the associated work very much. Angel Engine and Liminal Land rely a lot more on AI-generated images, and it shows not just visually. I also find the Angel Engine video game to be an interesting divergence from the original series that forgoes the generative AI and comes out as a far more cohesive and appealing piece of work. I can't stop anyone from using these programs, but there is a lot we can learn about ourselves and each other from just accepting the limitations that come from not using them. I also don't want to pave the way for the more callous forces pushing for AI just so they can make a few more $1 million. I thought I was going to be a lot more upset by the end of this video, because I was going to be a little personal, but there are parts of myself that I feel a little bit more rested by talking about all of this. I guess some challenges are worth taking after all, such as a rather fat Vampire the Masquerade video I have in the works which covers something that no one else has really discussed in the same way. Sounds like the kind of thing I should work on before someone beats me to it. Well, you can subscribe for more nonsense on the spooky to strange spectrum, such as the aforementioned Vampire the Masquerade video, or follow my Blue Sky for irregular updates on videos, unrelated projects, and misadventures. I have been Ignacio Vitalis, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a rewarding rest of your day. Look, I'm really sorry if the ending seemed weird. I had a hard time trying to end this video. I feel like I forgot how to end a video or something, but maybe those iceberg videos are just easy to end because topic, and then it's done. But this one is kind of a big ramble, so I hope the ending's alright, okay?